Imagine you could step inside the minds of Canada's healthcare leaders, glimpse their greatest fears, strongest drivers, and what makes them tick. Welcome to Healthcare Changemakers, a podcast where we talk to leaders about the joys and challenges of driving change and working with partners to create the safest healthcare system.
Hey listeners, it's Philip from HEROC here. How's your day going? Mine is going pretty great, as today's episode features not one, but two amazing healthcare changemakers. We've got Patricia Hoffer from St. Joseph's Healthcare London and Paris Semansky from CAMH. Now, I must add for complete transparency, today's subject matter revolves around all things communications and strategy. So pretty much, this episode is geared for me. But all kidding aside, over the past 60 plus episodes we've produced, I think the concept and value of communications popped up almost every time. And so we thought it would be great to have two healthcare communications professionals on the show. And yes, there will be some fantastic takeaways on how you and your organizations can be better equipped to communicate either internally or externally. But we also take time to recognize the importance of comms teams in healthcare and the value they bring to your communities. So let's get to it. I'm probably biased today because the guests we have, they're from the comms world and in healthcare, and we're so delighted to have Patricia and Paris with us today. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you.
And so let's get right into the questions. Why don't you tell our listeners a bit about yourselves, where you work, and what you do? We'll start with you, Patricia.
Well, so Patricia Hoffer, and I've been in communications, public relations, journalism, storytelling for, more than 30 years. And in my current role, I'm the Vice President of External Relations and the Chief Communications Officer at St. Joseph's Healthcare London. And I have the pleasure of working and leading a comms team. It's a pretty diverse and skilled and dedicated group of creatives, storytellers, content generators. I also lead the volunteer services department here at the hospital, at the organization, and that's a team of 5 and over 700 volunteers, and care
Wow.
partnership, which is something that's really close and dear to my heart. And that is our care partnership office. We have over 100 care partners, and these are people who are patients, families, caregivers, who have a lived experience with us, and they contribute to the design and delivery of our programs and services and make sure that we stay grounded in the needs of the people we serve.
Wow, that's a lot of hats you wear, Patricia.
It is a lot of hats, but they all converge really nicely. They all align, and it makes for a very rewarding position.
Excellent. How about you, Paris?
Hi, I'm just so excited to be here. Thanks for the invite. So I'm Paris Semansky. I'm the Director of Communications and Public Affairs at CAMH. We're the largest mental health hospital in Canada, located in downtown Toronto. And it's so interesting to me, Patricia, to hear you talk about your role. And I think there's so much that's similar in our roles and so much that is shaped in a little bit of a different way. And I think that, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but that speaks, I think, to communications being such a broad, it's one word, but it means a whole bunch of different things, and it can mean a whole bunch of different things, especially in a healthcare context. So for me, in my role, I lead our internal and external communications, our public affairs, which I deem as a bit more of a broader sort of public policy and advocacy, sees us take on a lot of social justice issues, government relations, and then increasingly a lot of relationships with different partners and stakeholders in the community. So we sort of think about ourselves as media strategists, issues managers, writers, designers, translators. We're web developers, digital designers, photographers, storytellers. We're stakeholder engagement experts. We're public policy advisors. We're brand protectors. We're advocates. And I think what we're increasingly trying to demonstrate is that we're connectors and we're problem solvers. So that's sort of how we try to think about ourselves and position ourselves within our organization.
I love all that. And I feel like we should take exactly what you said, what we do, so that we can make a template for all comms people across in healthcare and say, hey, show this to your leader so they can see exactly
Exactly.
everything you do. I really appreciate that. And I also love the fact that you brought up the fact that, it's one word, but it means so many different things. That's so true. And so you did kind of touch upon my next question. I guess it's like you're psychic as communications leaders in the healthcare sector. We'd love to hear your thoughts then on the value of strategic integrated communications. And Paris, you did touch a bit about that and how all the stuff we do. So maybe we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, for sure. So this is something I've thought a lot about. I had the joy of doing and then finishing. The joy is really in the finishing my master's recently in communications management, and did just finish last month. And so this sort of idea of what it means to be a communicator has been really front and center for me for the last couple of years as I've done that work. I think for me, the biggest way I think about the value of strategic integrated comms, or, another way to think about it is communications at the senior table or that sort of thing is I think we should be thinking about communications as a strategic management function. So when we think about management functions of organizations, we go to finance, we go to HR, we go to operations, those kinds of things. They're critical. There's no question about that. But communications is also a very particular skill set. And when it goes really wrong, there are major implications for us, right? So, when our reputation, when our brand, either takes a hit or isn't consistent with what actually happens within our healthcare organization, that's a problem, and that's everybody's responsibility. But it's certainly on communications, I think, to really be. I think about us as boundary spanners or constant environmental scanners. We're constantly looking at what's going on in the world. And so we have a view that I think is pretty unique, and we have contact with the outside world in ways that sometimes, in ways that rightly so in organizations, especially when we're, doing things like delivering healthcare, we're heads down. Folks who are really doing that work are doing that work, and they're focused on it as they should be. And so who then is responsible for sort of figuring out what's going on around us and how we respond to that? And I really see that as the communicator's role.
I think that's brilliant. And I think, to build on that a bit, the role and the value is exactly what Paris talked about from the perspective of driving culture, improving and strengthening our brand and our reputation, and making that alignment of what are the priorities of the organization, what is the strategy and the vision of the organization, and how does that converge with our community, how does that converge with the needs of the people that we serve. And as strategic communicators, we have that ability to illuminate those priorities and make them relevant and make them resonate for people. And so I really see that, to build on what Paris said, it's really about building those connections, making it relevant, making it relatable, and then also bringing in that risk mitigation, that brand reputation management, all together in a way that from a communication perspective and from a strategy perspective, we can pull all those pieces together.
I just want to jump into and say I agree with everything you've said, Patricia. And, I think it's this interesting thing. I think as communicators, the things that people know we can do are the things like the posters and the messages and that sort of thing. And I think it's this, I think it's both our partners across hospitals, healthcare organizations, seeing us as partners in more than just that sort of thing. But I also think it's on the communicator to position ourselves in that way, right? To bring to the table more than just, I kind of say we can make your poster better, but we can also probably make this thing better, right? And so, to engage early, to engage often, and I think it can feel nerve-wracking sometimes as a communicator to sort of sit up and say, well, this is what we actually think is happening in community, and how that aligns or doesn't align with what we're doing as an organization. And I think that's actually a responsibility of ours. And I think maybe not one that comes across all the time when we're just drafting the comms plan.
It drives to, for me, that concept of why, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer in Simon Sinek, start with why. So to your point, Paris, we're known for the what and the how. When we go back to the why, then that's where the strategy comes in, and that's where the purpose and the matter comes in.
I'm gonna challenge you both now. You're saying, everything you're saying, I'm like, yes, more. But what tips can you give the communicators, in those teams to find a way to connect with those leaders and say, hey, we're more than posters and PowerPoints. Like, what has worked for you?
So I think it's, and Paris touched on this a little bit. I think it's finding that balance of when is the right time to engage communicators and engage the communication department or your communication strategist. Because there are times when my experience has been we come to the table too early, the plan isn't completely formulated, or the vision isn't clear. Although I would argue that comms has the ability to play that role. It's when there's an absence of a strategy or a plan and comms becomes that plan that things start to go off the rails.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really about finding the right time to say, okay, when do we engage? And you can engage early, we step away, give some advice, and then come back when it's perhaps, sort of fleshed out a little bit more. The other piece that I think is really important is taking a team approach. When I arrived at St. Joseph's, the communication department was very structured by portfolio. One person was assigned, a particular area, and there was a lot of onus and responsibility to build relationship and understand and build a depth of expertise around that area. We've really shifted that model to be more about a team approach. And when you have a team approach, you bring much more diversity of thought, much more creativity, much more strategy to the table. And so by nature of the work, communication is a collaborative endeavor. And I respect that there are departments out there that maybe don't have teams of people, but there's always synergy and there's always benefit to bringing just more than one voice around a table. And so I think that's a crucial learning for me that over the years is the benefit and the impact and the power of teams and collaboration. So those are that fighting against that misconception that comms is the strategy, and really helping leaders understand that our goal is to take your plan and enable success and make it sing, and no matter what it is, right? Whether it's an issue that we're trying to manage, or it's a great story that we're trying to tell. When we know what you're trying to achieve, we can come alongside you and make that happen.
Interesting you talk about the team approach, because Patricia, we haven't talked about this before, but we did a really similar thing actually at CAMH, where we have some folks who are leads in certain areas, like sort of like a bit of a one window in for certain sort of internal clients, but similar to what sounds like we're really matrixed, where it's sort of we're all accountable for core things together. We each have our strengths, we each have a certain set of knowledge, but I agree with you completely. I think it's really important that we have different perspectives weighing in on different topics. And I can't agree with you more on comms becoming the strategy being a really difficult thing. And that's, I think you and I have had this conversation before, around often that happens with EDI portfolio pieces. The piece I'd say that's worked for me, and it's a bit, it sounds a bit dark, is don't waste a crisis. Mm-hmm. So I think a crisis of any kind is one of the best ways to demonstrate to leadership that communications is not just about your poster. And sometimes, you don't, a best case scenario is you've been in the room enough to help mitigate crises in the first place, but probably not all the time. And some of them you can't mitigate, right? Crisis and issues are just part of what it is. I think when we have had the opportunity, and I say this, in different roles, different portfolios, different organizations, when communicators have the opportunity to be at decision-making tables in the middle of a crisis, we show our full scope of practice. We show our ability to be strategic. We show our ability to think about the broader community, about stakeholders, about government, about media. And then, yes, of course, there's messaging and there's ways that it has to get, look a certain way after. But when we're at those tables, and I think, I think for some communicators, COVID was that. There was a real chance to be at the table and really part of how are we in this, ongoing persistent crisis, how are we helping to shape the strategic response of the organization? And then I think, that has been one of the best ways to demonstrate that value. And then you're constantly, you're not saying we told you so, because that would not be collaborative, but you're definitely speaking up when you think that there's a reason to speak up, and ahead of, kind of giving those warnings. And then it only takes a couple of times for those warnings to become true for your advice to be seen as part of the strategic value of the organization.
And I think, to build on that a bit, Paris, it's also that concept of bringing communications to the table early.
Yeah.
Don't put us on the back foot all the time, right? And be transparent with us. Be open with us. Tell us, where the risks are, so that we can be prepared. And so when it comes to that crisis, so many times that crisis or that issue, there was a spark of the potential of that very early on. And bringing your communications experts around the table to help identify what those potential risks are is so critical. And, we spend a lot of time, as you know, sort of mitigating and thinking about every potential scenario. And we have this, sort of reflection where we will do, for an example, a tough Q&A. And I've been in a room where a leader will say, do you really think they're going to ask us that question? We'll go, well, they could, probably not, but it's our job to think of every possible question that could come out of this.
Yeah.
And that is something that I think is often underestimated.
No, absolutely. My next question, I think you've answered a couple of them, but I'll ask you anyways. In your personal opinion, what are 3 to 5 strategies that are integral to ensuring that your comms team can succeed in a healthcare setting?
Patricia's already laid this out. I think all comms teams, all hospitals at a corporate level, and certainly all comms teams have still quite a way to go on diversifying their teams. And I mean diversity in a whole bunch of different ways. But I think that that's really critical. I think one of the core things we can do to make our team successful is to have our team not all be the same in background, experience, socioeconomic background, racial background, religious background. There's so many different components to that. And I think we see in action different perspectives come out when we bring broader perspectives to the table. So I think that's the sort of shaping of who your team is. I think comms is also a funny it's a bit of a funny industry because there are always cutting edge things happening, and then there are always sort of strategic things that will always remain true, right? And so I think, one of the things that I think a lot about is what does it mean to be, constantly upskilling ourselves and constantly learning, I'm not probably going to be really learning how to do certain things on, none of us can use TikTok now, but on, say, on other channels. But I better understand why they're important. And I better understand what they mean for certain audiences. And so I think that's an onus on sort of more senior level or senior folks on your team, is to be constantly learning and to be learning from the new folks you have coming in and to be getting new folks as often as possible. I think that's really important. And then I really think, I think this applies to any team. I think how we see ourselves as leaders in managing a team of people who support each other and have each other's backs, who are accountable to each other, and flexible with each other. I think for me is my biggest pandemic learning is I really love work and I really want to work with people who love work. So how do we do meaningful things together, be inspired by mission, vision, values, and a sense of purpose, which I think most of us in healthcare are, or else we wouldn't be here. But then how do we also say, and you get to be a whole person and I think one, it's, you get the best out of people when you do that. And so there's sort of some productivity tips in that, but good grief, life's too short, right? So I think life's too short to work on crummy teams. So I just think that's sort of for me been the biggest focus over the last little bit.
I'll add, agree with the points that Paris has made, and I'll just reiterate some of the ones that I mentioned earlier. That sense of, engage our team early on, engage comms early, and leverage the expertise and the perspective. I think the other one is provide time and opportunity and space to be proactive versus reactive, because that fuels it fuels creativity. It allows time for that strategic approach that we talked about. So when we're working in real time in a constant churn of either issues or things that come at the last minute, that stifles that ability to bring that creativity and that innovation that for comms teams, especially in healthcare, often gets sidelined.
Yes.
Because we're so caught up in the doing and so caught up in trying to stay on top of it all. And I certainly try and find those opportunities on our team to say, okay, where can we just grab a little bit of space to breathe and to have some creativity and have some fun? Because back to Paris's point, like that's so critical from a well-being perspective. I think the other thing that we sort of touched upon is making sure that communications has a seat at the leadership table. I can't emphasize that enough, because without that, we don't have that line of sight on not just issues, but on opportunities that others won't think about from a communications perspective or from a storytelling perspective or from a brand perspective, right? So have that seat at the table in some form that is direct, that it can't be somebody's going to sit there and then relay it back, because it gets lost in translation. And our communicators' brains we operate differently. And so having that seat at the senior leadership table in some fashion to drive the communication strategy and think strategically from a communication perspective is critical for success. I don't communications can't be successful if they're not at the table.
I loved how you both brought up the fact that teams need that space, that time to just be and think and be creative. And so something that we do in our team is like every few months, for example, we'll go to like the art gallery just to have a morning, just to like see something different. That's not that's not healthcare. That's and then we talk about the things we see, and in some instances the things we see we're like, wow, that we could totally use that for this campaign, or we can totally use elements of something, say we read something on the wall, like we could use how they, wrote that, or whatever the case may be.
Well,
Yeah.
and it allows a connection to our community in a much different
Yes.
way, right? When we step outside, I love that, Philip. It
Yeah.
reminds me of when I
Yeah.
first started. That was one of the first things I did with our team is we went on a field trip to the museum, to London Museum, to the art gallery here, and just walked around and, like you said, absorb the art, talk about the art, and it's a connection in a completely different way. It gives us a different perspective. And all I said to the team was, you may take something away that applies to our role, but you may take something away that just fuels you personally. And
Yeah.
either way, that's a good thing.
I'm actively taking notes right now. Thank you, Bob.
You're so funny. And speaking of that joy, I want to ask you both, is there an initiative that you've worked on that brought you real joy, that left you beaming with pride?
I think it goes back for me to the realignment of our team, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
and moving away from that sort of siloed, somewhat specific approach to now. And now we have a team that works in a different way than we did before. This was a key learning from the pandemic, because the pandemic really meant that whatever portfolio or responsibility you had before was out the window, and it was
Mm-hmm.
about, here's the work, how are we going to get it done? And so it was one of those silver linings that we took away and said, after we emerged from that, what was good about that situation, and how do we continue to enable it? And so now we have a team that, it works better, in my opinion. The team finds those synergies easier, and we've just found ways to be supportive and be collaborative, not just in the work, but outside of the work as
Yeah.
well. It's created greater resiliency and purpose, I would say, for the work of the team. And so I'm proud of the team and how far they've come from that perspective.
I'm in the same headspace, Patricia. I think, there are lots of campaigns or this or that, and those are great. But oftentimes the things that look really good externally are the things that are maybe the messiest or the least joyful internally.
Yes.
Not all the time, but that can sometimes be the case. I think I'm exactly in the same space as you. I feel like the work that, and I put this all on the entire team, our entire public affairs team, the work they have all done to show up for each other and for the work in such a supportive way, and being also committed to bringing our whole selves to work. For example, this is so small, but we have a little WhatsApp chat for our leadership team. So, myself and our managers on our public affairs team. And, it's, who should I go to for this or that? It's work stuff. It's also a lot of cat memes. It's also a lot of, my kid threw up today. My emails are going to be a bit slower today. And half of our leadership team has, our moms with young kids. And I can't tell you the difference that's made for the other folks on the team to understand what that experience, what that morning looked like for folks,
Yes.
But also for other people who are, maybe are going through some difficulties with caring for a parent, or, are really doing some work on themselves from a therapy perspective and need time to sort of do that. Like, just this idea of when we start to open ourselves up a little bit, it can feel like we're being maybe too vulnerable, or it can feel like we're, not keeping boundaries up. But I think it's part of how we show up with our whole selves, is we're also giving permission to each other to show up as our whole selves. And we're just going to get better work as a result. Like, it's also a product. Like, again, we're going to get better work. We're going to have people feeling more deeply committed and connected to each other because they actually really understand why that person needs that no one should have to justify taking a vacation. That's not what I mean. But when they are off, it's like, oh, I'm so glad for them. They really need this, this, and this. Like,
Yes.
oh, I can't wait to, monitor the media inbox while they're gone. Like there's a genuine sense of, oh, I get to help this person who I care about in our work so that they can be supported in their lives. And I saw this, there's this stat, I don't know what exactly, I'd have to find the exact reference for it. But, this idea that your direct manager has a bigger impact on your mental health than your spouse. And I believe that's true. And I feel, and it's not always the case, I don't always get it right, but when I think about our team, I think about my direct managers and then the people they manage. And I think about, that's maybe if you kind of like, then extend that to their immediate family. My hope is that that's, however many, 50, 60, 100 people, if you kind of keep spreading it out, whose lives, mental wellness, mental well-being are better because they work in an environment that supports them. And that, I think there's a big, that we do good work kind of is incidental to that.
Oh, it's true.
I was having a conversation just earlier this week, actually, with a colleague, and we were chatting about how the workplace and leadership has shifted so fundamentally. I've been around for a long time, and I remember the phrase of, you leave your stuff at home at the door, like come to work, and that is just not the case anymore.
No.
And leadership aside, as individuals, we have a responsibility and I think an accountability to each other to provide those environments where people can feel safe. And we do have to balance, of course, being an employer and what that responsibility is. But we can't expect people to leave their, I won't say the explicitive that will get beeped out, but to leave their stuff at the door. It's just not possible. Our work and our life and our it's too intertwined to do that, and we have to recognize that across the board.
And I think it provides value too, right? Like I think there's also not even just the value of productivity and trust, and when those things are in place, things happen faster, right? When trust is in place, my goodness, you can move so much more quickly. But I think there's also lived experience, and lived and living experience is a word that kind of gets thrown around a lot. But I think, I think there's also there can be a safety to bring your own ideas about something based on who you are, based on your, specific demographics, experience, that sort of thing, if it feels safe to do it in non-work ways, right? So I think that's also, we just get better advice.
Well, and when you know and you can feel that you're being seen, that also has a huge impact on your work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So even if you don't actually vocalize or share that story, but that it's seen, it's heard, it's recognized by the people around you, then it impacts your work in a positive way, I would hope.
I think it's so amazing that we had this had this conversation on safe spaces and the value of connectedness of our team members. I think Paris said it. When we bring ourselves and we feel safe and comfortable and creative, we do the team. And Patricia mentioned it when with the redesigning of a team. The people around in the organization, the people in the community, your friends, your family will see, I can guarantee you will see the impact the team and their work has because they feel so safe and connected and, part of that team. And I really appreciate that we spoke about it today.
Mm-hmm.
And so, shifting a bit, what do you personally do to remove noise that comes along with our job from time to time? How do you both stay motivated and focused on, work that matters and not get bogged down by things that may not prove to be impactful or, could be a hindrance?
I feel like this is a forever question in big, I think in any organization, big or small, how do you stay focused on the stuff that matters? Was at a session recently, and they were talking about sort of getting your altitude right? So getting the kind of what level are you at, and how difficult it can be as a manager, or in different kinds of roles if you're expected to be. I'm using hand gestures, but you can't see, but if you're expected to be up here and then all of a sudden you're supposed to go back down into the details and then you're supposed to go way back up. And I think part of that, and this is a luxury, I think probably for Patricia and I, because we're in hospitals where we have some resource for teams, right? And other organizations are only looking at one or two people. So it's it's definitely a privilege that we have to have that, but is really understanding the shape of your team in terms of what are you expecting people to focus on at each level. And I think, where we had come from was our managers were doing a boatload of doing. And they should do some doing. I do some doing, right? Like that's not, you shouldn't just be pie in the sky, just thinking thoughts all day. But I think you really need to think about what does that look like? And so I would say that, like, really practically understanding what level of thing do you have each level of person at? And then I also think it goes back to some of that psychological safety, that sense of your team having your back. And feeling like what you're driving toward as a team, so that you at any level can feel confident or comfortable saying no to something, or saying no, not right now, or knowing to go to your manager and say, this feels like a thing this person really wants, and I get that, but it doesn't feel like it's maybe the best use of our time, or this or that. And I think that kind of empowerment is really hard, but I think is really, really important. And then I think there's also some other practical things that I have not totally nailed down. I'm still trying to figure them out, even for myself, and then trying to share them with other members of my team. But I'm trying to do things with my calendar, which sounds really basic, but
No.
we had a beautiful time of meetings free Mondays that went well for a while, and then got collapsed by by life. But I do try not to have any recurring meetings on Mondays, so it can either be filled with sort of more urgent things that have to be taken care of, so it doesn't fill up the rest of the week. Or ideally, it's your brain is much better at a Monday than it is a Friday.
Yes.
And meetings free Fridays are fine, but you're not going to get real work done, brain work done. And then the other thing I've done, and this has been a bit more successful, is because I know on Fridays I am not going to be doing a lot of great thinking work, I have blocked out my afternoons for coffees and conversations and in person, or, that sort of thing, which I also think can fill us up in a different kind of way and keep us focused on the why of what we do, and give us good advice on the how.
So all of that, and I'll take a little bit of a different tact. I go back to starting with the why, and focusing on and trying to stay grounded on why are we doing this work. And we actually did, as part of a team retreat a couple of years ago, what is our departmental why? Why do we
I like
get
that.
up? Why do we? And I have a saying that people have come to know me for, is, why am I throwing the covers off in the morning? And so that sort of helps, and obviously it's easy to lose track of that and lose sight of that when we get into the muck, but staying grounded in why are we doing this work. The other piece is that I think is really critical is asking for help with the things that we don't know how to do well. And so focusing on the work, I try to focus on the things that I'm good at, that I know I can do quickly and without too much angst. And those things that I'm not good at, and those things where there's somebody else on the team that's really good at, then it's asking for their help and their support, because we're not good at everything. And if we built our team well, we built a team that leverages each other's support, strengths, and weaknesses. And then from a practical sort of, going back to your calendar reflection, Paris, I try, and I don't succeed at this every day, but maybe 3 days out of the week, when I come in the morning, I do not open my emails. I really
Oh.
spend about 15, 20 minutes thinking about what is success going to look like at the end of this day.
Hmm.
How am I going to know that this was a good day, a productive day? And that just allows a bit of a grounding in what do I want to get done? What interactions am I going to have? And before jumping right into it, because, it's so easy to come in and just even before you come in, honestly,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and start, triaging emails and start making the to-do list and start getting really bogged down in the what. And so just spending a bit of time thinking about, okay, how am I going to manage this day? And then the connections piece is huge as well. I remember having a conversation with another leader about having had a great day and what was the reflection about what made that day so positive. And it was about connection. It was
Mhm.
about having connected and connections in a number of different ways, right? I'd had an interaction with a student. I'd had an interaction with a colleague from a former role that hadn't talked to in a while. And yes, they can be 15 minutes, they can be half an hour, but
Yeah.
they provide a spark that often gets lost when we're just heads down, get it done, 12-hour days
Yeah.
and churning it out.
I love that not checking email because it's true. As you were saying it, Patricia, I was like, yeah, I wake up, I open my email, and I'm doing all this triaging, and then I actually forget, like, oh, I actually need to talk to so and so today, or I want to take 10 minutes to do this today, and I don't because you're right, I got into my email and and so that point you brought up, Patricia, it's like it's easier, it's definitely easier said than done
It's
for
easier
me.
said than done. And then there's another piece of it, which is circling back at the end of the day
Yes.
before I
Yeah.
leave to say, okay, did I hit the mark? And there are times when you don't hit the mark, right? And you
Yeah.
have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
But it is important to just kind of it goes back to that breath and that space and
Yeah.
Self
giving our
awareness.
100%.
I think we could talk for hours about all of these things. I think it also goes back to, though, the sense of urgency and the sense of I think it's in roles for a lot of us. I think I'm interested if that looks a little bit different sometimes for women, when it feels sometimes like we've got clocks on us where we need to prove ourselves, or if we're younger and we haven't had kids yet and maybe we want to, maybe there's a sense of I've got to get to a certain spot before I have kids, or, because I'm going to be out of the workplace, or if it's later, we're trying to justify, working hard because we've had the time out. I mean, believe me, I think it's not just about children. I think it's a culture piece across organizations. And I love what you're saying, Patricia, because I think sometimes we can say a lot of these things, but then if we're just saying them and not doing them as leaders, we're not actually giving permission to our team to do them too. And I think that's so important that we actually say to our teams, like, this is what I need to do to be able to do my work, and to continue to be a whole human person. And you can too. I think,
Yeah.
and there won't, there isn't a penalty for that. And none of us need to be in so much of a rush. And I think I think generationally, that's a thing. I mean, I think there is I wonder if, a generation that's, kind of, not boomer, not Gen X, this kind of millennial generation that's coming up, that really, I think, reshaped is part of how work has gotten reshaped. I think Gen Z too, but I think millennials with young kids are just sort of saying, I don't want to take a step back. Out of work. But I also am not willing to work, and only do work. Right.
Only work,
And so, I do think that's an interesting, I think it's a very interesting moment that we're in. And I think this sense of urgency wherever we can, we're not the ones doing the surgeries,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
no one's dying on our clock.
That's right. Another thing, that reason why I wanted you both on this podcast is because I this may sound corny, but I look to both of you because you just exude this confidence. You exude this I can hear it through your voice. Everything you do is grounded in empathy. And so,
Mm.
where did you both pick that up from? Is this something that you were born? Is this something that you're just like, because obviously they say that our surroundings are what are create us. So is there something from your surroundings that shaped you both?
Well, I think there's always a sort of a lived experience that feels into that, right?
Hmm.
I would say, though, that communication and storytelling, by essence, requires you to be empathetic,
Yes.
requires you to have that ability to listen and put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Um, and so uh, I think it's the nature of the work. I think it's the nature of who we are as individuals. Um, I've had the benefit of doing a lot of volunteer work, which also drives, I would say, that ability to be immersed in environments that have a diverse perspective and a diverse group of voices around the table that you are constantly you're constantly being challenged by, that you're learning from. Um, and so I think it's really the nature of the business that we're in. Not
Hmm.
to say that non-communicators
Yeah.
aren't empathetic, and I think by virtue of working in a healthcare setting,
Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit to your question about the misconception in this business. I think there are two, and one we've touched on. One is that concept that comms is the strategy,
Hmm.
but the other one is this concept that communications is impervious to the trauma that comes from the work that we do.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did a recent chat here locally with IABC, the International Association of Business Communicators chapter, around the impact um, of communications and crisis work on our health and well-being. And I think there's a misconception that we can swoop in and manage an issue and protect the organization and protect others from crises, and that there's no impact on us as communicators. It's certainly not to the degree that it would impact a frontline staff, but there are other areas like patient relations and comms
Hmm.
that are immersed in traumatic events, and
Hmm.
we don't take the time. I don't think we spend enough time thinking about that and addressing that, and I really hope that's probably a whole other podcast, Philip,
Oh, absolutely.
around that, the vicarious
Mhm.
trauma of communications work.
But I'm happy you brought that up, Patricia, because it's so true. Storytelling is you're right, it's in our DNA, but those stories are not always rosy stories.
Mhm.
No, they absolutely are not. And we don't pay attention to the triggers, going back to individuals and what they're going through. You know, what triggers an individual who's covering a story in the moment of crisis, or is the communicator on call and doesn't have a choice to say and opt out of covering that particular
That's
or dealing
right.
with that particular crisis. How are we making sure that we're putting the right supports in place? I'm not by any means saying that we get to step away, but we do need to do a better job of checking in during, and of making sure that we've put some real wraparounds those individuals afterwards. We tend to do the crisis and move on to the next one.
I think I would say, I won't. This isn't about naming names, but definitely naming industries. I came up in politics, and politics is one of the least healthy work environments that you will find. And I don't think anyone who's worked in politics would say that's not the case. And I think a lot of what I have learned about leadership and about empathetic leadership has been, and it can go either way. I think you can either have poor experiences and not change your own approach, or it can impact you in a way that you decide you will not do it like that.
Yeah.
And so for me, I did have lots of good leaders in politics. It's not to say I didn't, but the culture itself is not made for people to be sort of held as whole people. And so I think it's been the difficulty and lack of care that sometimes is in that space has directly impacted how I've approached leadership outside of politics.
Hmm. I like that. So, for you, Patricia, you're passionate about volunteerism and community development and have been involved in a number of not for profit organizations. So, what fuels your motivation to give back? And in what ways do you think volunteerism helps you become a better communicator?
It's sort of always been in my DNA. It's always been a philosophy of mine that we have a responsibility actually to support and to give back to the communities where we live and we play and we work and we go to school, and that makes our communities better, and whether it be the arts or social justice issue or the environment. And whether it be through philanthropy or whether it be through volunteerism, it enables something that may already be happening to go from great to awesome, in my opinion, right? So there's so many organizations, they get their base funding, and we certainly see that with our foundation here, that when donors step up, it takes what care was great and makes it excellent. It builds that bridge. And so volunteerism to me is the same. It enables organizations that maybe can't do what they would love to do with the staffing resources that they have, but a volunteer just steps it up to another level. And we all benefit when that happens. So I've always believed that it's a responsibility that we have, when we live in a community, that we give back to it. So that's what motivates me. It allows me to learn new things. It challenges the status quo, and I get to meet some really fascinating people. From a communication perspective, it's sort of the same, right? It provides a
Yeah.
different perspective. It brings diversity of thought and experiences. It challenges my thinking. It challenges my biases when I have that opportunity to give back and to be in situations, or be in environments that I wouldn't normally get to be related to my work, and it just creates that culture of ongoing and continuous learning for me.
That's amazing. And to you, Paris, during the pandemic, you bravely shared your journey on giving birth during the pandemic and the struggles that came with it, which made headlines on BBC, Toronto Life, and more. So, what inspired you to share your personal story on this? And I guess from a communications lens, why do you think storytelling widely and sharing such experiences is so important?
I love this question. I love talking about this. I think when you're going through a difficult thing, a hard thing, a unprecedented thing, there's something about being able to connect with other people and have other people connect with that experience that really just makes you feel less alone. And so that at the core of it was why I, wrote I wrote pieces that I shared in Medium and, talked to Toronto Life and Canadian Press and, really was open about that experience and that difficulty because, I actually found that it provided a lot of catharsis for me, a lot
Yeah.
of healing through what was, in a lot of ways, a pretty traumatic experience. And it reminds me a bit of, we as an organization have actually asked Patricia to come and talk to our team about her work and St. Joe's work with patients and families and, about what telling your own story, the impact telling your own story can have on your own healing. And I really think about it from that perspective, that I don't know that if I didn't have I'll frame it in the positive, having the opportunity to tell my story and have it connect with other people was a huge part of the healing for me. And I think storytelling, I think we have to hold it really carefully. I think it's a gift when people want to share their story with us. I think it's absolutely important that we hold it with a lot of care and a lot of gentleness. And I think, again, whole other topic for a conversation would
yeah.
Patricia and others and their work around how to do that storytelling in a different kind of way that's less extractive and more, creates meaning for somebody else as well. And then I also think, I talked a little bit about this already. I actually, when I did my master's, my topic was about parents with young kids during the pandemic and their experiences of isolation and being online in particular. I think it's also for me part of a broader sense of thinking about what the impact of this major thing was on all of us, but my own lived experience as being a parent with young kids. And I think it's profound. and we have not had much of a, we've kind of gone back to business as if nothing happened, which can make you feel a little collectively gaslit. And so, I think saying some of it out loud to say that thing happened, it was real, it was hard.
Yeah.
It's not less hard because it's over. That's not how trauma works. So, so I think that's why, for me, it was important to tell my own story and hope. And I have had the experience of it, having connected with some other folks as well, which is the ultimate goal, I think, of any communications, is to connect with an audience that you want to be reaching.
Your point about everything you said, it totally resonates with me. And I didn't go through what you went through. I didn't, but that I think our conversation today is definitely rooted in connection, because we're sharing stories from our own perspective, our own lens, and that allows us to like understand. And like I said, I can just hear in both of your voices how you're both grounded in empathy, and I really appreciate that. But so to close off, because we could probably talk for 5 more hours, but I thought it'd be enough on a fun note. Our lightning round, and these are just short questions, and you can answer them in one word or one sentence, whatever you feel like. There's no limits. But the first question is, where do you both draw your inspiration or motivation from?
For me, it's music and art of all forms.
Fiction, reading fiction.
What was your first job ever?
I was handing out food. I was one of those food sampler people in the grocery store.
Oh, I love that. Very popular.
Yes. And Paris?
I think it wasn't really paid, but it was still a job. I think it was dropping literature for the 1990 election campaign.
Is there a brand or a person you admire for their comms work?
For me, it's the Obamas.
Yeah.
They never wavered from their brand, which was one of, sort of authenticity and accessibility and vulnerability and relatability.
I'm going to go with an area that's often maligned, but for me has been really important. There's an influencer, actually. So Sarah Nicole Landry, she's the Birds Papaya, and she has changed her brand and her position many, many, many times, but always at the core has been someone I found incredibly relatable and powerful to have out in the world and be connecting in the way she is.
Very cool. And my last question, if you were stranded on a deserted island and you can only pick one famous person, dead or alive, to be with you, who would that person be?
So the caveat would be that he'd need to bring his guitar.
Okay.
Because music is important. It would be Prince.
Oh, yes. That's a good one.
And not just for his music, but if you sort of read about him, he was very philanthropic.
Yes.
And very underground about his philanthropic support. And so I think some fascinating conversations to be had with Prince.
So a desert island is a long time, potentially. And I like stories. And honestly, Robert Munsch, the children's author.
Yeah.
His storytelling ability is unparalleled, but if you read him in interviews, my goodness, that man has been through extraordinary ups and downs in his life. He's been through substance use challenges. He's been through mental health challenges, and he's talked about them in ways that I am just floored by. I think if it had to be a long time, you get the ups, you get the downs, you get some kids' stories, which are frankly usually the best stories. I think I could hang out with Robert Munsch, and that'd be a pretty good time.
So we need to be on the same desert island
Yeah.
with Robert Munch and Prince.
Or they need to be in so you can swim to either one. Well, I want to thank you both so much for joining us today. I took so many notes. This literally was like 5 master classes in one. And I just want to thank you both. Like I said to you earlier, to you both, I look to both of you for inspiration and motivation. I know I asked you both that question, and for our listeners, we were at the three of us happened to be at a conference together late last year, our healthcare comms conference. And there wasn't an individual who I didn't bump into after you both gave a talk who didn't say, I need more of them. So I just wanted to let you both know that. I'm sure you heard it, it was just, it's just having leaders such as yourselves in this space. We appreciate that. So I just want to let you know, we both, our team at HEROC, and I know everyone who I come across with, they really appreciate you both.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you. I'm a Leo, Philip, so I can never hear it enough. So I appreciated it. It really does mean a lot. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can hear more episodes of Healthcare Changemakers on our website, heroc.com, and on your favorite podcasting apps. If you like what you hear, please rate us or post a review. Healthcare Changemakers is recorded by HEROC's communications and marketing team and produced by Podfly Productions. Follow us on Twitter at HEROC Group or email us at communications@heroc.com. We'd love to hear from you.